What do you think, Egon?
I think this building should be condemned.
Hey, does this pole still work? Wow, this place is great. When can we move in? You gotta try this pole.
What is going on? Thank you for tuning in to another episode. If it's your first time tuning in, you've picked an absolute beauty. This is one that I've been looking forward to because today I'm going to be unboxing and reviewing an item that's been at the top of my holy grails list pretty much as long as I've been collecting vintage toys. And I'm talking about the Kenner Real Ghostbusters Firehouse Playset. Now, the timing of this one's funny because it was only a few videos back when we were at Collecticon Campbelltown where I saw that firehouse, very incomplete if you recall, and pretty yellowed. So for that reason, I didn't pick it up and I decided to hold off for a more complete, better condition kind of keeper for the collection. I thought that I'd be waiting some period of time. I thought that I was going to have to source it from overseas. I was even chatting with Matt from Keep On Collecting about a contact that he has that could potentially source one for me internationally. But wouldn't you know it, just a few weeks after Collecticon, I jump on eBay and there's a beautiful example on there locally. And when I say locally, I mean the other side of the country, in WA. I'm on the East Coast. But at least, you know, no international postage, no customs, none of that bullshit. I didn't muck around. I put an offer in through eBay pretty quickly as soon as I saw it and had a good look at the photos. The offer was accepted and it was on its way to me and it's arrived, and I'm pumped today to unbox it and put it together and have a bit of a look at it because it's not something that I've not tested out all the play features and those sorts of things, and I'm really excited to do that with you guys today. Now, in preparation, what I have done is downloaded an original copy of the assembly instructions. I don't know if it's needed. I'm not quite sure if the seller has taken it apart and I'm gonna have to put it together. If that is the case, I don't know if it's tricky to put it together, but I came prepared. So let's not muck around. Let's cut the chat. I'm gonna move the camera around to make a bit of space and let's rip into this box and see what we got.
It's the Real Ghostbusters Firehouse Playset.
Figment, our firehouse is haunted.
No way.
Oh no!
I've been gooped.
Ding, ding, Ghosts at the stadium.
The Real Ghostbusters, each sold separately, assembly required.
Really happy with the packaging. Looks like it survived the journey just fine, which is good. I was a little bit worried about that. So let's go on and get it out. And wouldn't you know it, zero assembly required. I don't know if it came like this back in the 80s. I don't think so, because this instruction sheet details the whole process of putting it together from the ground up. But look at that. Assembled and ready to go. Let's get this out of the packaging. Wow. And there we have it, the absolutely iconic facade of the playset with those beautiful bright red doors. Tell you what, the seller has packaged this up really nicely. Everything's secured. The door hinges are perfect. Alrighty, so we've got some of the accessories. Now I'm going to give you guys a closer look at this from a different angle in just a moment. But for now, let's go through these accessories because there's a couple of extras here, or at least one extra, which is awesome. Alrighty, so first things first, we've got the ghost trap, which you can use to trap the little companion ghost accessories that come with the original Ghostbusters, these guys over here. So that's really cool. That's in great condition. The trapdoor slides perfectly, so there's no issues there. That's awesome. And then we've got the actual containment unit. So once again, the containment unit in awesome condition with that sliding door working perfectly. And just for good measure, a second containment unit with this lot. So that is awesome. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to just work out which of the two containment units is in better condition. Interestingly, they're two slightly different shades of red. So I'm not sure if that's fading or kind of yellowing over the years, or whether, you know, throughout the release of the Firehouse playset, whether there were slightly different, you know, paint applications used. So, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to clean them both up, but I'm actually going to keep this one because this one is a better match for the actual ghost trap. I'm going to use that second containment unit to get a little bit of my cost back. If anyone's watching this who is located in Australia who needs that, definitely hit me up and we can have a chat about that. But this seller has kind of stolen my thunder a little bit because I had in mind for this to be kind of an unboxing and assembly video, but man, they've gone and saved me the trouble by shipping this assembled and just beautiful. Like I mentioned, we'll get a closer look at this from some different angles, but I'm really happy with the sticker applications. The fire pole is in place. I'm looking forward to testing that mechanism out. There's a little bit of heat damage here and there, like some slight kind of melting in a couple of the edges. But I mean, these are little things. This is going to clean up absolutely beautifully, and I can't wait to get it on display. And yeah, this is awesome. So there we have it, guys. I'm proud to welcome into the Crusher collection the 1987 Kenner Real Ghostbusters Firehouse playset, and I'm absolutely stoked with this thing. First up, like I mentioned a couple times now, I thought that I was going to have to assemble this. There's actually a sticker on the ground floor of the playset that kind of confirms that it's a one-time assembly deal. Once those parts are connected, they don't come apart. So it was always coming like this. So obviously shout out first of all to the seller because they packaged it up beautifully, understanding that they couldn't pull it apart and bubble wrap each individual piece. But the other thing to note if you are looking at buying a Firehouse is probably best to be careful buying an incomplete version with yellowed panels thinking that you can swap them out later, because you can't. If I had have picked up that one at Collecticon and wanted to replace this kind of front facade piece, that wouldn't have been possible. So good to know. But in any case, I don't have to worry about that because I got me a beautiful example here. And like I said, I'm stoked with it. I'm going to turn this thing around so we can see all the sides of it, and I want to talk through the different features and the different play areas, and we'll test them out. So let me spin this thing around and let's take a close look at what we have with each level of the Firehouse playset. Alrighty, so let's talk about the ground floor of the playset first. The ground floor is obviously your garage storage for the Ecto One. So let's open up those red doors. I've got my Ecto One here, which is usually behind the Firehouse on display on this shelf. Let's pop the Ecto One into this ground floor and see how that sits. Now, one thing that's pretty awesome is the ground floor has a lot of sculpting details, and one of those details is grooves for the tires of the Ecto One. So if it's up on a shelf, it's not going to go rolling away. What is important to note though is that the garage doesn't necessarily store the Ecto One super efficiently, because the way that sits in there, it's either got its nose out or it's got its back out. So right now the Ecto One is sitting in the Firehouse, but I can't close those doors, so it's sticking its nose out. Otherwise, if you want to be able to close the doors behind the Ecto One, then the arse end of the Ecto One's going to stick out. So that's something to keep in mind. For me, that doesn't really bother me because the way I display this, I really like the look front on of having those, you know, Firehouse doors busted open with the nose of the Ecto One sticking out. But another thing to note, if you're wanting to you know, play out the iconic scene of the Ecto 1 bursting through those firehouse doors. If you've got the rooftop gunner's chair mounted up there, obviously that's not going to work, but from a display perspective, that looks really nice. So that works well as far as housing your Ecto 1. Now if we get the Ecto 1 out of there for a minute and just have a look at some of the other features on the ground floor, it's more or less your sculpting details, your pipes, your manhole cover, that sort of stuff. And then we've got some nice decal details as well. So some nice decals of equipment for maintaining the Ecto 1 and also your standard ghost busting equipment there on ground floor as well. Somewhat of a workplace for Egon. So some cool details there. But as far as the actual utility of the ground floor, all about housing the Ecto 1. Now your middle floor of the firehouse, it doesn't have too much going on. We've got a platform there, an L-shaped platform. We've got some balcony railing accessories, and then we've essentially got the library. You know, I guess you've got Ray and Egon's library. No doubt some books there from Ray's Occult, Tobin's Spirit Guide, all the rest. So we've got a couple of nice library decals. We've got, you know, a long bookcase on this side. Interestingly enough, on top of that bookcase decal, you've actually got a shelf here. I guess if you had some of the smaller accessories that came with your slimed heroes or your fright features, you could probably use this for a little bit of accessory storage. So that's interesting. You've got your shelf there, and then the other decal on the opposite side of level 2, once again, just you got some books, you got a vase, you got a used soda can. So lots of nice detail in the form of those decals. That's really it for the middle level. And then we go up to the top floor here, and that's where we start to get some extra elements, including some play features. Now before we look at those play features, there's an interesting decal up on this top floor of an old lady that looks a lot like the Granny Gross figure. Side note, one of my criticisms of the Real Ghostbusters line, as much as I love it, and I've mentioned this before, none of the iconic villains from the Real Ghostbusters animated series made it into the action figure line. I'm talking about the Sam Haines and the Boogeymans and all those sorts of characters. Instead, we got tons of wacky haunted humans. Now, the Granny Gross character, I'm not sure if she was based on any character from the animated series. If she was, I can't recall. But one thing that's kind of interesting is between the hat and the glasses and the kind of jaw, the decal here does look a lot like Granny Gross, so I'm not sure if that's just a coincidence or if that's supposed to be her. Alrighty, let's talk about these play features. We've got two main action features on the top floor of the playset. The first one being the Goop Grate here in the center of the top floor. That's where you'd stand one of your Real Ghostbusters figures, or maybe a couple of your figures. You've got foot pegs there to keep them in place while they're getting gooped, and then you're just unloading ectoplasm, or in the case of my childhood, if I had have had this unbranded dollar store slime, it's all good fun, it doesn't really matter, through that rooftop grate. And listen, as an adult collector, I'm really not a huge fan of dumping slime or ectoplasm or ooze on my vintage figures, vehicles or playsets. So I'm sorry to say that I'm not going to demonstrate that one for you today, but I can picture it now. You know, having one or two of your figures here with just strings of ectoplasm drooping from that roof and then continuing to flow all the way down to the ground floor of the firehouse would have looked cool as shit back in the day. I would have been so hyped, you know, having fun playing that one out. So I'm sorry to say I'm not going to demonstrate that one for you, but I'm more than happy to road test the other iconic play feature in the Firehouse playset. That's obviously the fire pole. We can't have a firehouse. We especially can't have a Ghostbusters firehouse without a fire pole. And this one is kind of interesting the way that it's engineered. So we essentially have a platform here with a few foot pegs for one or two of your figures, and that basically goes up and down a fire pole with spiral ridges that actually mean that instead of sliding up and down, the pole spins, or the platform spins its way down and kind of slows it down so it doesn't just, you know, ground to a halt. And it plays out pretty cool. And then up the top here, we've got a switch that essentially keeps the platform in place up the top. And when you flick that switch, the platform's going to spin its way down. So I've got a couple of Real Ghostbusters figures here. I'm going to test it out with one first. Let's pop Ray Stance on here. Alrighty, Ray's ready to go. There we go, that worked beautifully. Now, through seeing other people's reviews of this playset, I had seen instances where it either got stuck or the figure flew off if there was only one figure there. Like, from what I understand, it does work better with two figures, but that worked awesome. And then one thing to note with this, and I can imagine this is where a lot of these things got jacked up back in the day, you can't just, you obviously as a kid you'd want to do this a million times. You're not doing that just once. You have to actually spin the platform back up. You can't just slide it back up. So, I mean, as a kid I'd be trying to jam this thing back up to the top so I could do it a million times, but we slide the platform back up very tediously. And then we clip it back in place. So there you have it for the third floor of the playset. Then we've got the rooftop. The rooftop doesn't have a heck of a lot going on, but another option as far as display space. I'll most likely be using the roof to display some figures, but there's still some nice sculpting details there. We've got walkways, we've got pipes, we've obviously got the opening for the goop grate, and then we've got the switch to control the mechanism for the fire pole. That's a look at the interior. You have to say, looking at this from the eyes of an adult collector, it is a bit lacking in the play features. There could have been some really simple additions here in terms of storage for accessories, somewhere to hang the proton packs. Something like that would have been really cool, but visually it's iconic, and it offers a great platform to display the collection of action figures. I think this thing's going to look fantastic when I get it on display with a whole bunch of figures. But if we're talking about the Kenner Firehouse as a display piece, to me it's the exterior where it really shines. I love the big windows, I love all of these rendered details. On this wall, the cracks are fantastic with the exposed brickwork decals, and of course, few parts of this are as iconic as those beautiful big red doors. Obviously, as a kid, you would have all sorts of fun smashing the Ecto one out through those doors, and I think for that reason it's tricky to find a Firehouse playset with those doors and door hinges intact, and that just makes me all the more grateful to have got my hands on this version with those doors so bright and red, the hinges working nicely, and everything so pristine. So to me, the exterior is where this thing really shines, and it forces me to make a tricky decision as far as how to display this, because ultimately I want to display the front facade of the Firehouse with those red doors open with the nose of the Ecto 1 peeking out. I also really like this wall here with the exposed brickwork, but I can't display this thing without showing one side open and filling the Firehouse up with figures. So I really don't know from which angle I'm going to display this. I think it's going to look tremendous from all sides. If you have this, or you got any ideas around the best way to display it, definitely let me know, because I'm not quite sure which way to go about it. Now, the other items I wanted to mention are the trap and the containment unit. Now, the trap has a sliding door at the bottom, and the trap's perfectly sized to fit these little companion ghost accessories that came with each of the vintage Real Ghostbusters figures in. You can fit one there, you can probably fit a few in the trap. And what's really cool is the trap is perfectly sized to go into the back of the Ecto 1, so that's awesome. And then we've got the containment unit, and the containment unit is massive. The opening to the containment unit is a similar sliding door at the top here, and then the two sliding doors are engineered in a way where you can slot the trap on top of the containment unit, and with a simple slide back and forth, the doors remain closed, but magically your ghost has transferred to the containment unit. And then both the containment unit and the trap have some really nice sculpting details. Like, my favorite element here is this little recessed area on the front of the containment unit that looks like where the Ghostbusters would have deposited the little handheld trap. So that's some cool details there. Fun additions, fun additional play elements to the Firehouse. But the challenge with these items is they're really big, particularly that containment unit. So as far as display goes or storage goes, if your Ecto 1 is on the ground floor of the Firehouse, you really have no room for the containment unit. I suppose the trap could just stay in the in the back, in the trunk or the boot of the Ecto one. But that containment unit's just going to have to sit next to the firehouse, or maybe on one of the upper levels. So I'm not quite sure how I'm going to display that, but I'll certainly figure that out. And then, like I mentioned during the unboxing, this firehouse came with a spare containment unit. So that's awesome. That's a little bonus, but that's not the only bonus piece that the firehouse came with. It actually also came with another Ecto one, which is awesome. Now this Ecto one is super rough around the edges. It's got a bit of damage on the back here, so there's some cracked elements there. We don't have the rooftop gunner's chair, and we're missing a door. So needs quite a lot of love, and I'm not quite sure whether I'm going to just sell it as it is and just like that spare containment unit, use it to get a few bucks back against the cost of the firehouse, or whether I'm going to have a crack at doing a bit of a restoration job. I'm not quite sure yet, but it definitely needs some love. It's got the winch in the back. The winch works, so that's cool. Replacing that door would be really straightforward, but my only concern as to whether I have the ability to be able to restore this thing is we've got a cracked panel on the back there, so I've got no idea how I would possibly fix that. Now, one thing that's kind of interesting about this Ecto one is we've got some stickers here that I'm pretty sure came from the Ecto 1A, which makes me wonder if this was actually an Ecto 1A or if those stickers have come later, because when you look at that logo sticker on the back, it's the Ghostbusters 2 logo, but if you look at it really closely, the sticker doesn't quite fit in the recessed section. The recessed section where that sticker goes is the same as you'd have for the regular logo. So I don't know if Ecto 1As use the same mold and therefore the stickers didn't perfectly line up with the recess. I'm not too sure. So this might have been an Ecto 1A. My original thought was to potentially try to bring this back to life, get some replacement Ecto 1A stickers and display it as an Ecto 1A, but again, I'm really not too sure. Rough around the edges, needs lots of love, but I'm certainly not complaining about having a spare Ecto one. So there we have it. The iconic vintage Real Ghostbusters Firehouse is in the collection, and I can't wait to clean this thing up and get it on display. I'm blown away by the scale of it. I think because up until this point, the vintage TMNT Technodrome has been the biggest playset in my collection, and in terms of height, this thing towers all over it. And the other thing that I was thinking about is the places where I've seen the firehouse before are big spaces. Andrew from Keep On Collecting, I've seen his in his collection room, which is a big space. Obviously the last time I saw one was at Collecticon Campbelltown in a big hall. If we're being kind, my collection room is, let's say, cozier. So I think just by comparison, this thing looks even bigger. So I'm blown away by the scale, but I'm also blown away and really impressed with the condition of it. A lot of the Firehouse playsets that I've seen, mainly online, but also that one at Collecticon, are pretty yellowed, particularly this facade, this front facade often has some yellowing. I get the sense that was a pretty common issue with the Firehouse. This one is beautifully white. I mean, I've just unboxed it, so it certainly needs a clean. But yeah, blown away by the condition, blown away by how beautiful the decals are. Not one decal on this thing is missing. And shout out to whoever's mum or dad applied these decals back in 1987, because these definitely aren't the work of a kid. The decals, I can't fault them. Now, I know the Real Ghostbusters Firehouse is not exactly the rarest vintage toy in the world. On social media, on YouTube, I see plenty of collectors that have them, but the fact that I've wanted this for years, and the fact that you really don't see them often, if ever, complete in this sort of condition here in Australia, for me to call this anything short of a holy grail would not be doing it justice. Now, there is one point that I've not mentioned that you've probably been wondering for the last 15 minutes, and of course, yes, it's missing a piece. It's missing the iconic sign that plugs into these peg holes here. Thankfully, my mate Ryan from the YouTube channel Ryan the Collector Kid has managed to source one for me. Ryan is traveling interstate to hit up Collecticon in a couple of weeks with Matt, Andrew, and myself. Ryan's going to bring that sign over here for me so I can get that set up, and that'll complete the Firehouse. Like I said, not counting the tub of ectoplasm, which I'm still on the search for. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say goodbye to you for now, and then I'm going to leave you through the magic of editing with some shots of this thing with the sign, with the Real Ghostbusters, so you can see how it looks on display in the collection room. But before I go, I want to thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed my unboxing and my thoughts on the vintage Real Ghostbusters Firehouse. Like I mentioned a million times now, I'm stoked to have this thing in my collection, and I hope you enjoyed my thoughts on this awesome playset. So thanks as always for watching. Hope to hear from you in the comments. If you've got any childhood memories of the Firehouse, if you had it as a kid, or your friends or cousins had it as a kid and you played with it, if you dumped slime on this thing, I want to know about it. So definitely hit me up in the comments, or better yet, one thing that brings me a ton of joy when it comes to collecting vintage action figures, vehicles, playsets, toys in general, is I love seeing those childhood photos of people playing with this stuff back in the 80s or 90s. I don't have a ton of photos of me as a kid playing with this stuff, but I'd love to see yours. So if you had this thing as a kid, add me on Instagram and DM me or tag me on some photos of you playing with this stuff. I'm probably going to ask for this in each of my videos quickly, because I love to see that stuff, and if you're comfortable with it, I'd love to share it. So definitely do that. Hope to hear from you in the comments. Hope to hear from you on Instagram at Crusher Collects. But enough of that. Thanks again for watching. If you've hung in this far, you're a dead set champion. And until next time, cheers.